NASA says now is the ideal time to focus on Venus. This is in line with the new disclosure of a possible existence on the world. If you take a look at the records of NASA from the 1960s, you'd see the space organization calling Venus a planet from damnation. Mars transformed into ours, simultaneously predestined. The careful naming of the deepest planets isn't an occurrence. During the fierce space race period, the Soviet Union was focused on sending expensive missions to Venus. The terrible planet displayed virtually no alternatives to death, but the Soviet Union's space program did not retire the Venera program until the fall of the empire. Thanks to Neil deGrasse Tyson, we at last know why. Join us as we analyze the Venus photographs that were declassified, taken by the Soviet Union. The fall of the Soviet Union was active in more ways than one. In addition to the fact that it changed the international course of the world, the collapse of the empire also sank numerous mysteries with it. The Soviets had a strong preference for secrets, from running the world's best intelligence office to keeping their potential contact with extraterrestrials a secret. A number of secrets from an earlier superpower remain hidden. Honestly, prior to the United States of America dominating most endeavors on a planet in outer space, the Soviet Union was leading the game. While the empire has a long history of unsuccessful and fruitless missions in space, its greatest obsession was Venus. Venus is an internal, hellish planet. In Russian, Venus would be perceived as Venera, resulting in the name of the mission that spanned from 1961 to 1983. During the same time, the United States of America was focused on sending its missions to the moon. In an intelligent move, the Soviets chose to utilize their assets elsewhere. We can't say that the whole fixation on the strange second planet from our sun was for nothing. Were the Soviets anticipating utilizing the planet's surface as a practical and great army installation? Or were they possibly intending to colonize the planet, immediately following the search for any type of life there? It's extremely difficult to explain why the empire was so focused on the ghastly planet. Since the Soviets commissioned these investigation trips, they were not, during the Cold War, open and honest in their arguments and goals. If truth be told, our knowledge of the Venusian missions is based on declassified and unarchived proof. Even then, it's difficult to pinpoint the Soviet search criteria. In the event that they discovered the secrets of Venus, the Soviets never set foot on Venus once, twice, or even 3 times, just rudimentarily. The Soviets launched 28 costly rockets to the startling planet, and 13 of those entered the Venusian air, whereas 8 successfully landed. Such complex missions had put the Soviets in a leading position in space investigation. Make no mistake, the United States of America was a close second, yet satellites were more intriguing to NASA. Rather than researching whether life exists on other planets, Mars's warmth arrived. Following that, neither history textbooks nor popular narratives have done justice to these feats. Your textbook may not tell you this, but the Soviet space program was the first organization to launch a probe into a planet's atmosphere, aside from Earth. It also had another bundle of firsts on its resume. The USSR became the first state to achieve a soft landing on another planet. It was the first to bring back pictures and sounds from another planet's surface. That's correct. The Soviets had their own individual modest step for man, one huge leap for humanity. And they did it before the United States. So why do we rarely learn about such milestone missions? Keep in mind our remarks regarding Soviet partiality for keeping secrets. That's only one of the many causes of the oversight. In 1992, the Soviet space program, the well-known organization, was decommissioned as a result of the fallout. Both the USSR and the organization needed to be revived with its new Russian identity, Roscosmos. A lot of its historical information was either destroyed or lost. This is precisely why we don't have a clear explanation for the Soviets' actions. They launched 28 spacecraft into the Venusian environment, but if we had to make the most accurate estimate, it might be that the Soviet choice to investigate Venus was about reducing costs more than anything else. This does not imply that the space program had no hope for their ability to live on the planet. Looking for inexpensive ideal water presence, power from solar radiation, and the fundamental features of the planet. Without a series of these space missions, it would have been nearly impossible to measure Venus's high temperatures and thick atmosphere. Today, a lot of cosmologists don't think that the appalling planet could support life. The temperatures up there are high enough to melt lead, and there isn't enough water. Additionally, due to the thickness of its atmosphere, the pressure on Venus is many times greater than Earth's. However, these are very recent and current developments. To ignore the USSR's contribution to the investigation of Venus is similar to editing history. As it pertains to the Soviets, Venus was worth investigating, even if it was just to stoke the space race. You see, investigating more livable planets like Mars wasn't exactly off the table, yet it was more expensive. Everything involving sending probes to Venus simply reduces to the distance from Earth to another celestial body. The ghastly world is only about 40 million kilometers away from our home, while Mars is, on average, 250 million kilometers away. Such tremendous differences in distance make significant cost differences. Also, if the United States of America wasn't the world's largest economy, it could never have been easy to investigate Mars. Different reports suggest that Soviet missions were unreliable and had significant technical gaps. Evidently, the spacecraft weren't suited to cover cosmic distances. Additionally, the agency had a poor track record of maintaining contact with its rockets. So it makes sense why the Soviet space program decided on a shorter and closer journey that would yield results. However, if we don't consider the space race in this setting, the narrative of the Venera missions would not be complete. The United States of America wasn't even on the space map when the Soviet program launched the first artificial satellite, Sputnik 1, in 1957. This move intensified the space tussle and maintained Soviet dominance. However, what's truly the reason why the United States concentrated on the Moon? Aside from unknown areas where NASA failed repeatedly with its missions to Venus in the 1960s, the U.S. Space Agency found itself in a stalemate known as the Venus Curse. Every time they conducted an investigation into the Venusian setting, it went horribly wrong. This is precisely when the Soviet Union saw an opportunity to capitalize on the failures of NASA. At the time, both the US and the USSR wanted to win. The most logical plan for the space race was to take advantage of two different options. It was a quiet understanding. Very decisively, the Soviet space program seized the sister planet of Earth as the greatest milestone in the space tussle, achieving something their American partner had failed to complete. The Soviet dedication to the Venera program was unwavering. Even in the face of frequent technical setbacks, political pressure, and limited resources, they pressed forward. Their missions were methodical, iterative, and determined. Each failure informed the next attempt, and each partial success was used to push the boundaries further. By continuing to land probes on Venus, despite the extreme conditions, they demonstrated not only a remarkable level of engineering resilience, but also a strategic commitment to asserting dominance in space exploration. One of the most iconic achievements came with Venera 9, which became the first spacecraft to return images from the surface of another planet. These black and white photographs, though grainy and limited, provided the first glimpse of a Venusian landscape: flat rocks, a horizon blurred by the dense atmosphere, and light distorted by immense atmospheric pressure. Following that, Venera 13 made headlines by not only surviving for over 2 hours on Venus's surface, but also transmitting audio recordings. These eerie sounds, along with more refined images and soil analysis, proved that despite the planet's hostility, scientific exploration was possible. No American mission at the time had come close to such planetary intimacy with Venus. While these victories were monumental, they remained largely underreported in the West. The political climate of the Cold War meant that any Soviet progress was downplayed or ignored by American media. The U.S. narrative focused instead on Apollo triumphs and Mars curiosity, moon landings and Martian rovers, which were indeed incredible, but they obscured the balanced truth of early space exploration. Today, as we look to Venus again, with renewed scientific interest sparked by discoveries like possible phosphine in its atmosphere and the planet's geological activity, it's worth re-examining the legacy left by the Venera program. These early missions laid the groundwork for everything we know about Venus today. They were bold, dangerous, and visionary. Without them, we would have no direct data about the surface pressure, composition, and atmospheric conditions of Earth's twin. It is even arguable that without the Soviets' groundwork, today's renewed missions to Venus wouldn't be possible at all. As space agencies like NASA and Roscosmos now consider joint missions and private players like SpaceX and Rocket Lab enter the interplanetary race, Venus is back in the spotlight. The path ahead may be collaborative, but it was forged in competition. Ultimately, the Venera program is a reminder of what humanity can achieve under pressure: both literal and metaphorical. It's a testament to the spirit of exploration, perseverance, and the unrelenting curiosity that drives us to explore even the most inhospitable corners of our solar system. For them, the early years of the conflict provided more capacity for heavy lifting than the U.S. of America. That advantage turned out to be quite beneficial. Building on their capabilities, the USSR began to assemble and fire more powerful rockets that were designed to stand up to high temperatures and great distances. The Soviets rushed to experiment with both manned and unmanned spacecraft. At the same time, the Soviet academic community was working on a series of evaluations and calculations to generate precise paths for the Venus missions. Behind the scenes, their Mars programs were also running successfully. For the Soviet Space Agency, nothing was more important than creating elaborate instruments for these investigations. These efforts resulted in the greatest breakthrough in the history of space exploration. Venera 3 was introduced by the Soviet agency in 1966, thereby making it the first synthetic probe to enter the Venusian atmosphere and successfully make contact with the planet's surface. This pivotal achievement increased the level of competition between the two superpowers. Unlike the American missions that were filled with failures and stalemates, the Soviet Union's program continued to advance. Despite the program's gradual progress, the Soviet Union was successful in sending probes to investigate the environment of Venus. The most significant issue with this approach was limited design capacity. The Soviets quickly overcame their planning issues and introduced the most recent Venera program rockets in the 1970s. Their highlighting capability allowed them to conduct the first dual launches, the introduction of Venera 4 and Venera 5. The majority of historians agree that this was the most fascinating decade in the history of space exploration. Indeed, the United States of America attempted similar plans for launch. So, why did the Soviet agency opt for dual launches into Venus? To understand, you must acknowledge that advanced technology is required for space travel, equipment for gathering the highest level of evidence and data. Clearly, the spacecraft was first launched to survey the surface of the planet. That's exactly what happened with Venera 4. Since the launch went smoothly and the spacecraft entered the atmosphere of Venus effectively, the Soviet program continued with Venera 5. It wasn't just another instance of a launch. The second spacecraft was designed specifically to collect one-of-a-kind information about the planet. The Soviets aimed to break through barriers of temperature, atmospheric pressure, and radiation on Venus. They were not required to wait long for their responses. By the mid-1970s, the Soviet program was entering its most advanced stage. Everything the USSR had done up to that point was about research. Development was concerned with ensuring that their technologies and designs were optimized. It was also about perfecting the methods and mechanics of interstellar travel. But for the Venera mission's second decade, the Soviet Union wanted the most successful exploratory missions. The fascinating beginning of this era was Venera 7, the 11th Soviet investigation. When it entered Venus's atmosphere, it became the first spacecraft to send information from another planet. Already, there were signs of high planetary densities, temperatures, and surface pressure. At this point, the Soviets were trying to record Venusian sounds. The next major success in the program came in the mid-1980s. Venera 13 had surpassed all previous interplanetary investigations in terms of complexity. This spacecraft was the first to capture color panoramic photographs of Venus's surface. At the same time, the Soviet program launched Venera 14 to gather similar data about the surface of the planet. As the Soviet Union was one of the first countries to discover and recognize Venus, the Russian Space Agency has renewed its ambitions for Venus missions. Venera D is a planned collaboration between Roscosmos and NASA. It will look into the atmosphere and surface of Venus. The abbreviation Venera D stands for Venera in Russian. It is expected that the mission will debut in the late 2020s or mid-2030s and aims to study the planet's atmosphere, geological history, and search for signs of any ongoing or past habitability. The spacecraft will include an orbiter, a lander, and possibly an inflatable platform to study the planet's environment, including the long-term legacy of the Venera missions. The mission of Venera goes far beyond technological achievements. These missions have had a global impact. Initiated by the Soviet Union during the height of the Cold War, the Venera missions represented humanity's highest point of inventiveness and tenacity in exploring the universe. Despite facing numerous difficulties and challenges, the Soviets persevered in their quest to uncover the mysteries of Venus, a planet long regarded as hostile and unfriendly to life. One of the most critical aspects of the Venera missions was that they were the first to use mechanical probes to investigate the climates and surfaces of other planets. These missions paved the way for future exploration beyond Earth's neighborhood and established the foundation for our understanding of planetary science. The data collected by the Venera spacecraft provided valuable insights into Venus's extreme climate, including its scorching temperatures, crushing atmospheric pressure, and toxic atmosphere dominated by carbon dioxide. Additionally, the technological advancements made possible by the Venera program had broader implications for space exploration. The creation of heat-resistant materials, robust communication systems, and reliable landing techniques were crucial accomplishments that contributed to subsequent missions to other planets like Mars and beyond. The lessons learned from the Venera missions continue to influence the design of spacecraft and operational tactics in modern space exploration. Beyond their scientific and technological significance, the Venera missions also had profound social and political ramifications during the space race era. These missions symbolized the rivalry between superpowers for dominance in the space program. For the Soviet Union, achieving success in the Venera missions was not only about scientific discovery, but also about demonstrating expertise in technology and ideological superiority over the United States. The international community closely observed every mission and recognized their significance in expanding human comprehension of the solar system. The smooth landing of Venera 7 on Venus in 1970 marked a major achievement as the first spacecraft to send data from another planet's surface. This achievement brought attention to the Soviet Union's ability to overcome the immense challenges posed by Venus's harsh conditions. In addition to scientific instruments, the Venera spacecraft carried cameras that captured the first close-up images of Venus's surface. These images revealed a rugged terrain dominated by rocky plains and volcanic features, providing researchers with useful geological information about the planet's history and evolution. The photographs of the landscape taken by later missions, such as Venera 13 and 14, increased our understanding of Venus's surface morphology and composition. Despite their successes, the Venera missions also encountered their fair share of setbacks and challenges. Some missions either failed to reach Venus or experienced technical malfunctions that prevented them from transmitting data back to Earth. As humanity advances further into the era of space exploration, the foundational efforts of programs like Venera are increasingly recognized for their monumental importance. These early missions provided not just data, but proof that exploring other worlds was possible, despite enormous odds. They demonstrated how sustained commitment, even from behind an iron curtain, could break through planetary barriers and deliver tangible results. The importance of collaboration in future missions cannot be overstated. While the early space race was defined by rivalry, modern efforts, such as Venera D, highlight a new paradigm, one of cooperation between space agencies across national borders. This shift reflects not only the complexity and cost of interplanetary missions, but also the shared human curiosity that transcends politics. Venus, often overshadowed by the allure of Mars, has emerged again as a crucial candidate for studying planetary evolution, extreme climate systems, and the limits of habitability. The data from Venera missions have become a baseline for all subsequent missions aiming to probe deeper into Venus's mysteries. With increasing signs of renewed interest from agencies like NASA, ESA, and Roscosmos, as well as private space companies, Venus is poised to return to the center of planetary science. The legacy of the Venera missions, however, is not just scientific. It is a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. Every launch, failure, and breakthrough brought us closer to understanding a planet so unlike our own, yet so vital to the broader story of our solar system. In this sense, Venera's story is far from over. It continues to inspire future engineers, scientists, and explorers to look up and ask, what else is out there? And how far can we really go?